Wuthering Waves 3.0 is great, but it isn't without its issues. Now, what exactly do I mean by this? For the most part, I actually enjoyed 3.0. The new areas are stunning, the new Tomb Break combat mechanic is a nice mix-up from what we're used to, the motorbike makes travel between areas easy, and there's a lot more. However, there were definitely parts of the game where I thought this could be better, or this isn't as polished as the previous updates, and quite possibly one of the worst thoughts you could have when playing a game: this isn't fun. So join me as I ramble for the next half hour about both the goods and bads of 3.0, and while there were definitely a lot more goods than there were bads, the bads are a lot more significant. And while not quite an example, as it works fine most of the time, is the autopilot feature. When I was recording footage for this video, the autopilot decided to just route me around the entire map of Lahairoi and back again without any endpoint. I honestly thought that this was pretty funny, so I'll have the entire journey in this corner over here. Back to the video, let's begin with the good. The new map is beautiful. This is something that Kuro never fails to deliver on, as the previous regions of Huanglong, Mount Firmament, the Black Shores, Renacita, and Septimon all had stunning visuals, and Lahairoi is no different. There were moments where the game genuinely took my breath away, like when I approached Solisea Plains for the first time and it literally opened up in front of me. Or after I repaired the underwater tunnel and drove through it, just seeing all the aquatic life swimming around. The motorbike I honestly enjoy more than flying in terms of what it actually does. The controls, how you can summon it almost anywhere, the modding system that easily could have gone into the cash shop but didn't. Honestly, zero complaints. Though I do wish Lahairoi did let us fly every now and then. Flying is just way too fun. And yes, it is faster to teleport to waypoints, and I honestly do when I'm feeling lazy or when I just want to get a few things done, but most of the time, I don't mind driving wherever I need to go, even if it is on autopilot. And autopilot isn't even that bad. It gives me the opportunity to just enjoy the scenery, which I rarely do in these games. And there's even the cinematic mode, which turns the game into a mini movie as you drive down the road. And if I do want to drive manually, it's honestly pretty fun. The controls are responsive and you can climb any wall that's tilted by even a little bit. You can invite other characters that you own to sit behind you as you ride. I'm not sure why it shows the intimacy level when I'm pretty sure it doesn't go up when you have someone join you, but I don't care. I get to drive as Sanhua. This is the next best thing from having her canonically join the rover like she said she would once she retires as Jinxi's bodyguard. The racing minigames are a fun pastime that just so happens to give rewards. If they make racetracks a full event where we can race against other players, that would honestly be pretty fun. Or maybe something like a level maker where you can make your own maps and upload it for other people to try. I'm not sure how difficult that would be to do. I'm not a game designer, so this is just me wondering what could be. The range tether / grab function is a giant quality of life that I was not expecting, which makes gathering materials so much more efficient when you are on your bike. The radio function is a nice addition as well. While personally, I don't have much of a use for it since I mainly play on PC and I can just have YouTube on in the background, a lot of people don't have a second monitor or they play on their phone. On the topic of music, the Persona and Sonic mini collab was a completely unexpected surprise, but not an unwelcome one. I do wish we got more than just 2 songs. I'm happy with what we got, but if we just got a few more, that would have been so nice. 2 of my favorite songs from the Persona franchise are Mass Destruction from P3 and Rivers in the Desert from P5. But as I said before, I can just pull these up on YouTube when playing, And I'm pretty sure getting a collab with a very well-known IP and also one of gaming's longest standing icons was not easy to do. The tomb break mechanic, even if it is a little bit janky at times, is a nice mix-up from the usual flow of combat. It's basically like having a second vibration meter, except once it breaks, the sound cue is pretty satisfying, you can deal a nice chunk of damage to the enemy. The jankiness I mentioned is when I fill up the tomb break meter, but I don't get the prompt to actually tomb break, so I'm just spamming F like an idiot trying to get it to work. And I'm pretty sure that some enemies have super armor or damage reduction until you inflict tomb break, but I could be wrong about that. And the best part is you don't even need to inflict tomb break to defeat enemies. Sure, it'll speed things along with that chunk of damage, and yes, it will interrupt enemy attacks, but at the end of the day, if you don't want to use Tomb Break or even deal with it, then you don't have to. You can just attack as you normally do, and you'll do just fine. That statement is going to either age like wine or milk depending on how the enemies are in endgame content. The Void Storm zones are a nice step up in difficulty outside of just endgame content. The enemies are level 100 like most endgame content. They knock you around, you're punished for being reckless as you get a healing debuff every time you get hit, which is sometimes pretty hard to do when there are just so many particle effects. The new field boss Hyvatia has a really cool mechanic where it'll see the future and then counter what you do. So let's say you dodge the ultimate the first time around, it'll rewind time, and then when it does it again, you can't dodge because it'll have predicted that, meaning you have to parry, and vice versa if you parry it the first time. When I was farming it for materials for Linné, I never experienced it because it would die so fast. And then during the MSQ, when I couldn't just burn it down, I was honestly taken by surprise when I was hit by it. And when it did, I just had this giant grin on my face because it was just a really cool and unique concept. I'm really hoping that Kuro adds more unique mechanics to future bosses because this was just a fun experience. The new Owl Watch scanner for gathering chests is such a nice quality of life change. Using the sensor to locate chests in a small area was fun the first few times around, and then it eventually just got tedious, and now I'm glad that they added a function where you can use your bike, fly off a ramp, and collect chests all in one go. The new overworld quests are great. I wasn't expecting such a story to come out of a side quest, and if you haven't done them, I highly recommend that you do. The side quests aren't voiced, but it doesn't take away from the actual story. And there are so many more things that if I ended up talking about them, this video would end up being very long. However, with all of these good things about version 3.0, it's also dragged down by a few key issues that was also brought in by the update. The first issue I want to talk about is a little bit more on the nitpicking side, but it does have the potential of becoming a bigger issue later on. And this is about the new flying enemies, Hyvatia, and the new 3-star echoes, the Twin Novas. In terms of pure design, they're great. I like their sleek robotic looks, I like their attacks, I like the way they zip around the sky, but that's also where the problem with them lies. In most games, enemies that have access to the third dimension for movement are not fun to fight, especially when the player either has limited access or no access to the third dimension. In games like Ace Combat or Battlefield, this isn't a problem because everybody can move across the XYZ axis. However, in Wuthering Waves, very few characters have access to the Z-axis. Yes, we can fly in Huanglong and Renacita, but we can't fight while using the wings, nor can we use the wings in La Hairoi. The only characters that can consistently attack while floating or flying are Yuno and Linné. Every other character can only do a plunge attack or maybe one attack every now and then that goes through the air. And so, when we're up against an enemy that is constantly flying around, most of the player's time is spent chasing the enemy down, getting a few hits in, chasing the enemy down again, and repeat. This wouldn't be much of an issue if the enemy was fragile, but the Twin Novas have a lot of HP because they are 3-star echoes, while Hyvatia is a field boss, so it has the health pool of a field boss. The only ways to ground them would be to either break their vibration meter or to inflict Tomb Break. Unfortunately, in order to actually break their vibration meter or to inflict Tomb Break, you have to be able to hit them enough times in order to actually do it, which may be tedious to do when they're flying around. When the AI is working properly, get it? AI? Kilted robots. Fighting them is fine. But it's when the AI decides to bug out and stay completely defensive that fighting them just becomes an absolute chore. There was even a moment where the Twin Nova I was fighting got stuck in a tree and wouldn't come out, and because the geometry, get it? Tree. Geometry. And because the geometry was messed up, I couldn't even target it or even hit it properly. I mentioned earlier that this has the potential to become a bigger issue, and that's because there is a very good chance that the Twin Novas and Hyvatia will be appearing in endgame content. And with the two main endgame modes having the rewards tied to a timer, I can see a lot of players getting very annoyed when we spend most of our time chasing the enemy instead of actually fighting it. It's the same reason why I don't like fighting the sentry construct whenever it's in the tower, because it begins the fight by taking off into the air, and the only two ways it'll come down is to either inflict enough damage to its vibration meter or by parrying that one attack that is roughly 10 seconds into its scripted attack pattern. When the player has little to no agency in a game, that is when the fun is removed from the game. And when the player begins to think this isn't fun when playing a game, that is a huge issue. And honestly, I'm not sure how to fix this. Take away Hyvatia and the Twin Nova's flight, and they lose what makes them unique. Keep their flight and run the risk of them playing tag throughout the entire fight. That or their AI bugs out and they end up getting stuck in some sort of geometry. Speaking of bugs, I don't know if this was just me, but this patch felt less polished than the previous updates. Granted, this has been an issue that's been building up since Septimont, but the performance has been getting worse. The game crashed when I was just biking in the overworld, nothing intensive. The side quest where you enter the bike simulation glitched where the camera angle was stuck way too low, and later I was stuck in an animation and unable to continue, and I had to relaunch the game in order to fix it. Now my PC isn't necessarily weak. I'm running a 4080, Ryzen 7700X, 32 gigs of RAM, and the game is installed on a 2TB NVMe. And yet, whenever I'm walking around the academy, my frames drop to 40 frames, even as low as 30. And if it's this bad on my PC, I can only imagine how bad it is on older devices or even on mobile. And speaking of Star Torch Academy, the story for 3.0 and the main point of this video. To reiterate what I said in the beginning, is good, but it is not without its issues. The main issue for me and other people from what I've seen online is that because the story was split between Linnea's companion quest and the MSQ involving the voidworm, the story felt oddly paced and even rushed at times. The voidworm was this huge set piece at the beginning of the patch with it chasing you down and even having a connection with the Thenodian, but for most of 3.0, is only mentioned in passing, almost like an afterthought. This, in my opinion, is part of the result of the removal of companion quests. I mentioned this in my previous video, but ever since companion quests were removed in favor of combining them with the MSQ, it hasn't always worked out in the MSQ's favor. Sometimes this works well, as the MSQ cannot work without the companion quest. Patch 2.4 is a pretty good example. Both halves of 2.4 were more or less Lupa's companion quests. From us beating her for the first time to after the Great Aegon, However, if we take out our meeting with Lupa, we would have no lead on finding Cardathea, who went missing, and that was one of the main reasons why we went to Septimon. Not to mention that Lupa was required, as she was the key to break Septimon out of that timeline that Christopher was setting up, which in turn prevented the Dark Tide from swallowing Septimon. Linnea's story in 3.0, on the other hand, is not the same. If we were to remove the second half of her story after we fight Hyvatia, almost nothing about the story would have changed. We don't need to know that she was a hitman or a mercenary when she was in the New Federation, as that was already heavily implied when we see her shoot a guy in the back of the head. We don't need to go through the drama of her getting expelled from the academy, as it does not relate to the voidworm. This is going to be delving a bit into a rewrite / fanfiction territory, but let's say, for example, after Linnea and Rover defeat Hyvatia, Warren could arrive. He can still be a little bit wary or suspicious of Linnea, but not be a complete asshole about it. And then we all return to the academy, where Warren and the other teachers would figure out what to do with Linnea. But as they do that, Rover and Linnea could still have the scene where they work on the calibrator, figure out what it does, and after that, before the teachers come and say that they're going to expel Linnea, in comes the voidworm because the calibrator was acting as a beacon while Linnea was working on it. It could have been some sort of failsafe that was put into the calibrator if someone tried to hack it. Anyway, Linnea and Rover leave to fight the worm, but this time not all of the anti-worm defenses are scrambled by the void storm, but Rover and Linnea still have to activate one or two manually. And so Rover and Linnea drive over to the desert. Linnea shoots the worm with her bike a few times, the defenses activate, and we get a short cutscene of Morny pressing a button on her console to activate the guns to bind the worm. Linnea shoots grenades into the worm's mouth. We win, and here's a big change. The worm does not die. Instead, it's only wounded so that it retreats. I mean, it has a part of the frequency from the Eternodian, and it was a huge set piece for 3.0. It should not have gone down in the same patch it was introduced. After that, we all return to the academy, we're all celebrated, and then the MSQ ends. Now, this is not me saying that what I just said is how the MSQ should have been written, but to show that Linnea's backstory was not even needed. And this way, Morny is involved a bit more in the finale. Luke could have been shown briefly back in the academy tending to the students who were affected by the voidworm's frequency or something, so that he has something to do. And on that note, Chisa. She was done so dirty in this patch. She appeared in the prologue, walked through the portal, sent us a text, appeared for like 5 seconds during the cutscene where the worm attacks, and that's it. She was a previous student of the academy who went missing for 20 years, so I thought that the game would make mention of that in some way. There was a part in the MSQ when Linnea leaves us to finish up a group project, and we're left to wander the academy alone. So what if instead of wandering the academy alone, we walk alongside Chisa as we walk through the entire academy, and as we do so, Chisa can have mention of how the academy changed, or just compare the academy as it is now to what it was in her memories. Sometime later, Linnea can join us again, we get the full tour of the academy, and then when Rover and Linnea leave to get the cassette tape burned, Chisa, already having her cassette burned, would not accompany us and will go to class instead. This whole sequence would be a very natural way to bring her back in after the prologue, for her to leave at the moment, and then later she can join us again during the finale. And yes, she can be a part of the finale. Instead of just appearing in a cutscene and looking at the sky for a few seconds, she could have been shown helping the other students get to safety, or maybe tagged along with us to reactivate the defenses. There were 3 in total, And keeping with my original idea of not all of the defenses being scrambled, Rover could get one, Chisa gets the second, Mornia gets the third one remotely, Lene defeats the worm, and then after we all return to the academy, Chisa could be seen talking to her parents. Speaking of her parents, I didn't even know she reunited with her parents because I missed the optional dialogue to talk to her during the MSQ. I only learned that she talked to her parents by seeing posts online, and even then, the reunion with her parents happens completely off screen. One of the main reasons why Chisa wanted to return to Lahai Roi was to see her parents again. Patch 2.8 revealed that her mother still loves her, given that she redesigned the uniforms based off of Chisa's outfit. I was 100% ready for a heartfelt and emotional cutscene of Chisa meeting her parents again, and I was left 100% disappointed. Chekhov's gun utilized in the worst way possible. Finally, I want to talk about the boss fight itself. Once again, this will be a bit more on the nitpicky side, and I don't mind this as much because it was clearly the first time Kuro did something like this, so it is very much experimental. The main part of the fight, where you drive around and pick up the balls of energy, that's fine. It's a simple mechanic, and it's a better mechanic than fighting a giant worm with a toothpick. My main gripe about the fight is the attack itself. The fact that the bike could shoot a giant laser came as a surprise, as the game didn't really hint at the fact that it could even do it. There was a small mention about how some students strapped on a missile system to their bike, but those were for their own personal bikes. But the bike is made up from parts from the Exosetter, so maybe that had something to do with it. Or maybe the bike's gun was from Lene's resonance ability. Anyway, going back to the fight itself, there is the janky animation when you shoot the actual gun. When I learned that we would be dealing damage to the worm by shooting it, I assumed that it would be some sort of free aim deal where we would line up a crosshair with a generous target circle and then shoot. What I didn't expect was a jarring transition to a different camera angle where the world essentially came to a stop, the bike's gun would charge up, and then we shoot. The sudden change in the camera angle would always throw me off even though I knew it was coming. You could even be driving away from the worm, but the moment you hit shoot, the very next frame would be the bike pointed at the worm and shooting. It was extremely jarring to experience and was not smooth at all, but once again, it was the first time that Kuro did anything like this, so I'm not going to be judging it as a huge negative. Once again, this is more of a nitpick. All that being said, I still quite enjoyed 3.0. As I said before, this patch brought a lot of great features that I enjoyed. The motorbike, exploration, tune break, all of these are great in and of itself. However, it is the story where I found the most problems, which is really unfortunate. I was hoping that Kuro would deviate away from the combining of the character companion quests and the MSQ, as they don't always mesh together, and the story is what most players are going to go through. The vast majority of the player base in any game are the casual players. The ones that drop in every update, play through the MSQ, and that's it. So if the MSQ and the player experience isn't really good, they are less likely to return the following patches. But this is all just the ramblings of one guy on the internet. Let me know what you thought of 3.0, what you liked, what you didn't like, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Peace.
can see the dawn on water's face, with the shimmering light that starts to raise.